Hey guys, welcome to Mike It Yourself. Today's video, we're going to be replacing the little headlight trimming there with some LED uh, turn signals that I purchased off of Amazon. So I got these. These were about, I think they're like 70 bucks on Amazon. So they sell them in, they sell them in black, and they also have them, I believe, in chrome. So if you needed a little extra bling in your life, you can do that. It should be a pretty simple install. We just need to remove the fairing and then be able to access these trim accents, swap them out. The way these get connected is in line with the existing wiring for your turn signals, so there's no cutting, no splicing. You just connect everything in and then put it all back together. So let's go ahead and get to taking this stuff off, but first let's do the intro. Damn it. Okay, so like I said, we're going to take off the fairing. I'm going to walk you through, the pieces that you need to do, and then I'm going to just go ahead and do it. Now, before you get started, I recommend you do this, and I tell you this because I've made the mistake of not, and I don't want you to pay that same price. Not that my price was huge to pay, but it could be. So, working on my Softail, I've dropped something and hit that front fender and put a nice good ding in the paint. So I recommend, if you're going to do any work above your fender, throw a towel over it, throw a piece of leather, whatever you got. Just protect that fairing or that fender. It'll save you a whole lot of heartache, and it takes zero time. Like, you just throw it on there, you're done, right? The other thing you're going to want to do is lay something out like a towel or whatever, because you're going to need to put your fairing down on something and you don't want to scratch it up. So the obvious is, of course, you wouldn't put it like paint side down, but just note that even if you don't put it paint side down, along the edge here, if it's rubbing on the ground and you move it around or whatever, you kick it, it's going to scratch it, right? So you want to protect it as best as you can. So I recommend just laying down a towel, if you have an old blanket, whatever, right? Okay, so that said, like I said, the removal of the fairing is relatively easy. You've got these 4 screws here that are along the windshield. You need to take those out. Behind the windshield, you have this little plastic piece. There's no screws to that. There's just clips, so you grab it and you kind of pull firmly up. That'll pop it out. Once you've done those 2 pieces, what you're going to want to do is put this screw and that screw in about halfway or so. And the reason you're going to do that is because when you undo the rest of the screws, you don't want this thing to just fall off and land on the ground, right? So that just kind of helps secure it, so that when you are ready to remove this, you can do it in a controlled fashion. It doesn't just fall off on you. So, like I said, you got those 4 there. Pop that panel that's behind this windscreen here. Put those 2 back in. You've got a screw there, a screw down here, and then behind the speaker grill, you got a screw there. So you have the exact same setup on the other side that you have to do as well, and then you'll be able to pull this thing right off. Now, I'll tell you, for pulling these things off, you want to be careful because you don't want to scratch your paint while you're doing it. You can use so they're just like, they're little clips that this thing pushes into. So you can use a flathead screwdriver and just pop it out. So you kind of get wedged in here and you can pop it out. If you do that, like I said, be very careful. Use a rag behind it so that way you don't, goof anything up. Or you can use like a 90-degree pick, and that's what I'm going to use. Stick it through the speaker hole here. You don't want to get a long pick, because if you do, you'll puncture your speaker. But you put it through the hole. That'll give you a little bit of ability to pull up on this thing, and you'll be able to pull it out. So again, it's not a hard process. Just be delicate. Don't overdo it or anything like that, because you can damage it with all of these pieces, right? When you do have this top side off, and I'll show you when I get to this point, you're going to have to disconnect the turn signal. So that wiring is up here. We're also going to tap into that wiring with the LED kit. So it's got a T connector, or a pass-through basically, that you're going to get in between. So I'll show you what that looks like once we get there. So for now, I'll go ahead and let me get this top part off, and then I'll bring you back so you can see that turn signal connector before we move on to removing the fairing. All right, as I mentioned, I've got the windshield off. I took off that top panel. It's quick and easy to pop it off. When you do remove it, I recommend like giving it a wipe down underneath here, because this is a space that you're usually challenged getting to. So wipe your stuff, get in there really good, clean out any bugs or whatever you got in there, so that way it's just easier next wash, right? The wires I had mentioned though are right here, right? So you got 3 wires. It's going to be your ground, a flash or your turn signal, right? That power for positive, and then a running positive. So you'll have those 3 wires. So if you look, you got a set here and you got one here. So you'll need to disconnect these. And well, so you got to pinch them to disconnect. And it's kind of hard to do while I'm holding the camera with the other hand. But so once you get them disconnected, and I'll do it once I have a free hand, but disconnect that one, and then you can proceed with the remaining bolts that I was talking about. So turn signal, lower side of the fairing. So there's 2 down there. You only have to do one of those 2. So it's the lowest one. So if you're doing this, make sure you don't do this upper one. That's not necessary. It's just this one. And then you got that bad boy right there. And like I said, underneath the panel. All right, so I've got all those bolts removed now. And just a correction to what I said earlier, it's actually not a pinch from the side. This has got a little top clip that you have to push on. So it's still a push, but easy to come undone. And right now, literally all that's kind of holding my fairing up are those 2 bolts that I put in there. And that's why it's important you want to get them there so that way it doesn't fall. But now that you're ready to remove it, you can easily hold it in place while you undo those screws. And this thing should pretty much just drop right on down. Um, and there you go. So these little trim pieces here, the way they're held on is you got to screw up here, you got to screw down there, and then where this ducting is, there's some pins, plastic pins that go through some holes. So you just need to remove those 2 and pull it out, and then we can install the LED lights in those positions. So I'm going to go ahead and remove those screws, pull that out, and then we'll get that LED one in place. All right, so I've got that one off. Here's the new LED setup. And like I said, it's got this cable here. So what's going to happen is your turn signal is going to get plugged into one end, and then this gets plugged into the wiring harness that's still left up here. And that's what allows this thing to work in unison with your turn signal. Now, installing these, it's pretty straightforward. There's like a nipple up here. Not to say you can't get this wrong, but it's pretty hard to get it wrong. So all you have to do is put that peg in the hole that was left by the other one, and you're going to see your holes line up. Put your screws in, and then we're going to route this wire up to the that turn signal wire, and then we'll turn them on just to make sure we got everything working just fine. All right, so we have the LEDs installed now, both sides. Like I said, 2 screws. I can't express this enough. Be careful when you tighten stuff up. This is just plastic, and then kind of goes for the whole thing. None of this is like screwing into straight up metal. So just note that. Don't crank down on it. I think the torque for some of this stuff is like 25 inch-pounds. Man, that's like finger tight, dude. Okay, so just make sure you're careful with it, because you will snap it, you'll break it, and then you'll be all, pissed off, right? So you don't want to do that. For the wiring, I just kind of routed it up here and plugged it into the existing connector. Now this one is what's going to get connected to the blinker when I put the fairing back on. I do need to add a little zip tie here and there just to kind of keep this stuff clean. But that's it. So let me go ahead and turn them on, and you can take a look at what they look like running and with the turn signal. So there you go. It looks pretty clean. I love that it has a running lamp. So just adds a little bit more visibility to the front of your bike. And then of course the turn signal, it doesn't alternate. I think the nicer ones might alternate between white and amber. I'm not sure. But again, they look great. I like them, and they're a fraction of the cost. But again, that other stuff, it's, when you buy the cheaper quality, it is buyer beware. I tend to try to buy my stuff on a budget, and as long as I'm happy with it, I'm good. If they last me 5 years, perfect, right? Can't complain about that. So I'm going to go ahead and button this stuff up, and we'll take another look with everything back on. So there's something I wanted to mention before I finish putting this together. And you can see my grubby handprints all over this thing, and that's another good reason why you want to clean this up. Is as you put everything back together, one, you want to do the top 2 screws first, like I was saying, just to keep it in place. But what's really important is make sure the holes line up like they should, and then you want to check like your seams. Make sure you don't have any new gaps, because if you got a new gap, something's not right. Okay, don't force it in. You may have to put a little bit of pressure, and that's okay, just a little bit, but it should fit relatively well because you didn't really add anything to it. So if you've got a new gap develop, something's wrong. Take it off, start all over. Okay. The other thing is, when you put your screws in, I like to put them all in, but do them finger tight. That way I have a little bit of wiggle room, right? As I put this thing on, and I'm not like cinching down in one area and then I can't get a hold of line up in the other area, and then goofing around with that stuff. So this just makes the process a little bit easier. So once you get all those screws in, then you can go ahead and tighten them down and finish up the job. So just want to call this out. Here's the plug for the turn signal on the fairing. This is the plug from the new harness, or that little Y connector deal that I was telling you about. So all you need to do is just plug that in, and that'll introduce now the power back to your turn signal, so that'll run. I have incandescent bulbs right now. I will be swapping those out to LEDs, so it'll all match. But let me go ahead and finish this up. I just wanted to call out that stuff, and again, make sure you're not killing it. You're not torquing it down like crazy, because you'll break it. It's plastic stuff, so just be careful. And here's a view of it all put together. Outside, it's a little darker now, so you can see the lights. They've got some kind of like, I don't know, texture on the inside, so they're not super bright, the daytime running light part of this, but the turn signal part looks decent. You'll notice that because that's a filament bulb versus LED, they're not going to blink in a perfect timing. So I do need to get the LED bulbs in there, so that way everything does synchronize, and there is actually a process to synchronize your turn signals when you do put LEDs in, so that's something to pay attention to as well if you do the same installation. Hopefully you liked this video. If you did, give me that thumbs up. If you like my content, consider subscribing. It costs you nothing. And if you don't want to miss out on my next video, hit that notification bell. I produce every Sunday at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And yeah, I hope to see you in the next video, and I'll see you in the win.